Hello and welcome to Business Standard. India has released its new GDP series with 2022-23 as the base year, alongside significant changes in how growth and inflation are measured. To help us understand what these changes mean for headline growth numbers, sector shares, and the credibility of India's data framework, I have with me Pronab Sen, former Chief Statistician of India. Mr. Sen, thank you for speaking with us. There are many methodological changes under this new series. So, which
Yeah.
one do you think is the most crucial and why?
Well, in a sense, I don't know whether one would call it crucial, is the issue of double deflation. I've been trying to figure out how it has affected the estimates, and I haven't come to a conclusion yet. But, the whole issue of double deflation means that, in a sense, you are using different price indices to deflate inputs and outputs. So what you're going to be getting is the total value of a particular product, and then you're going to get the inputs into producing that product. And you're going to use different deflators for those. Okay? Now, to my mind, it's an internationally accepted methodology, but it does create a problem in the sense that what you're going to get is something that will not be visible to you, because what will be visible to you is the price of the final product. So our old method was you use single deflation, where you use the price of the final product to deflate the whole value added. Here you're not doing that. So what you start getting is a difference between the deflator used for the value of output and the value added. And it's very difficult to figure out what that means, what it implies. So that, I think, is a major change. The second thing, which I think is a major change, and I think if they've been able to do it properly, which I hope they have, is to be able to segregate the output of multi-product firms. So earlier we had a problem. We used to classify the firms by their major product, right? So you could have a manufacturing firm which is doing a lot of services, but because the main activity was manufacturing, you added all the value of the services to manufacturing, and vice versa. And it's important to segregate these two, because these things work dynamically. So if you think about, take IBM, for instance. IBM was a hardware manufacturer. Over time, it became essentially a software developer, remember? And there was a long transition. Now, if you can keep those two separate, you're getting a much better measure of where the growth is happening. Is it in manufacturing or is it in services? And that's an important. Now, we couldn't do this earlier because the data didn't permit us to do so. So they've been able to do it. But I think, although they don't tell me, it would probably be partial, because not all companies would have the data broken up in that particular way. So the government does have a new data set in which that breakup is given, but it's not totally comprehensive. So there is a bit of a hodgepodge there. But it's certainly a step in the right direction.
Sure,
So
sir.
these are the two big things that have been done.
So, building on the second point that you were mentioning,
Right.
this new series has factored in survey data like the ASUS survey and PLFS to estimate the informal sector. Do you think
Yes.
such surveys best capture the informal sector activity?
You see, there are two things. What the old system was also based on a survey. Okay, don't get me wrong. So what we used to do earlier was we would have a survey once every 5 years, get the productivity, the value added from those surveys, And then we would apply those, we assume that those numbers remained constant. And then you would just look at estimates of the number of units in the sector and multiply by those estimates, right? Now what is happening with ASOS is that you are getting the productivity numbers annually. You're not holding them constant for 5 years. Now that's a huge improvement, okay? But it still doesn't take away the other problem, which is how many units. The trouble with the informal sector is that there is a very high rate of both births and deaths of production units. Okay? So at any given point in time, to have a precise estimate is difficult. And the problem has become more acute because we haven't had an economic census for a long time. The economic census gives you a cross-check on that. You can work out what the rates of birth and death are, so you can actually apply it year on year. But that hasn't happened in a while. And in the meantime, we've been through the COVID period, where we know that a very large number of unincorporated sector units died. We also have some indication that new ones are coming up now. But all of this now is still guesswork. So there is still a big question mark over those estimates.
So coming back to that methodological change part of the new numbers, do you think can states adopt these methodological changes to calculate the GSTP?
I don't think so. In any case, there aren't that many states which are capable of calculating GSTP themselves. Okay? There are maybe 7 or 8 states which can properly. Most of the others really simply outsource that activity to the NSO, and it's done in Delhi. So I don't think that's going to change. But if the states were trying to do this, it would be difficult for them.
So moving a bit away from the economic part of the numbers, so as we have seen in the past that whenever the GDP metrics is revised, there is a trust question. In your view, does this current present revision strengthen credibility or complicate comparability?
Well, this is a larger question. It's a very important question. Okay. So they have released 3 years of overlapping data, right? Now what we're going to have to do is to sit down with the old series data and the new series data and check where are the differences prominent and whether these differences are stable. If the differences keep changing a lot, then it creates a problem. Now that's a large exercise because you have to go sector by sector to understand this.
So, sir, the nominal GDP for FY26 is down by around 12 trillion rupees under the new series as compared to the first advanced estimates under the old series. How do you see this difference?
Well, that's difficult to say, but I think it's a price thing. So if you look at the new series, right, the overall inflation that has been taken is 0.9%. Now, that sounds on the lower side. I don't think any of us feels that inflation has been 0.9%. It's practically not there.
So, sir, and these new numbers also show us that even though the per capita income has risen, population growth has also continued. So, in real welfare terms, are households better off than the headline GDP suggests?
Well, I mean, if you look at it, the population growth, actually, the numbers that have been taken surprised me because there again, the growth rate of population is 0.9%. It's less than 1%. I think all of us thought that India's population growth was over 1%, 1.2, 1.3%. But what they're showing now is 0.9%. Now, this is not a number that the NSO brings out. This is done by the Registrar General's office. They are the ones who give the population estimates to CSO, and CSO simply has to take those figures. But it did come as a bit of a surprise. You're quite right.
So, sir, this shortage or the fall of the nominal GDP than the expected one under the advanced estimates, this also means that the debt to GDP ratio is around 58% rather than 56.1, which was estimated earlier. So, will that make it more difficult for the government to achieve the budgeted 55% debt to GDP in FY27?
Yes, it will. Absolutely, it will.
Then, on again, coming back to a macro and a larger question, if you had to identify one crucial blind spot that still remains in India's national accounts, what would it be?
Look, there are, I think, a range of question marks. As I said, that we have an economy where the corporate sector and the non-corporate sector are roughly equal. Corporate sector is a little bit larger. And we need to understand the dynamics of both to really understand. So we used to earlier give figures which were broken up between corporate and non-corporate. I was unable to locate that in this particular press release. Hopefully, when the accounts are fully published, those numbers will be there. But that is extremely important. We need to understand how these two parts of the Indian economy are performing relative to each other.
So, sir, then my final question would be, and this time you'd have to also think as an economist, but also as an ordinary citizen. What are the takeaways for an ordinary citizen as to why this GDP revision matters, if you were to explain it briefly?
The real takeaway, I think, in all of this is that what the revision does, there are a couple of things. First is, we rely a lot on ratios and proportions which come from the past. And until these revisions take place, those are not incorporated. And so these revisions are extremely, extremely important. But much more important than that is that now we have systems in place where these ratios can be updated on a regular basis rather than wait till the next revision happens. Now, whether they have built that into their system, I don't know, but I think they're in a position where they can do it. So I think we are better off than we were before. Now, there will be questions about whether it's been done properly or not, all of those kinds of issues. But set those aside. I mean, there are committees which go into that. But I think the revisions are in the right direction. Although, as I said, I have questions about double deflation. I don't like it.
I had a question around this double deflation thing. For a non-economist, why does this double deflation metric matter?
It doesn't really matter, right? If you think about GDP, one of the ways of measuring GDP is just to add up the value, the market value of all finished products. That's it. That will give you a GDP estimate, right? Now, if I'm measuring only finished product, then I can just use the prices to deflate them, to bring them to a constant term, right? But when you are measuring the value added per activity and then adding up that value added, that becomes a different ballgame, right? So you're not taking the value of the product. You're taking the value added contributed by that activity. Now, what do you deflate that by? Now, in the single deflation, you'd simply say, okay, if a company is producing a product, it's buying inputs. I'm taking the money value of the output and the inputs, taking the difference, and then converting that difference, which is the value added, in terms of that finished product. So supposing it's a car, you say this company, in the company, has produced, let's say, 40% of the value of the car. That's what single deflation does. What double deflation does is, it deflates the car by the price of the car, and it deflates the input prices, the input values, with each input price, and then takes the difference. So my problem with that is that although all of this is in money terms, it's still adding apples and oranges. So that's the long and short of it.
If you have any comments, bad or ugly.
No, nothing. I mean, what surprised me about these numbers, actually, I don't know if you noticed, is consumption has risen very sharply. Now, why that has happened is something to look at. Earlier consumption used to grow at about 6% or thereabouts. This time it's grown by more than 7.5%, which is what has happened to us. And it's a good thing if it's happened, but it came as a big surprise.
I think, sir, we'll get to know more about it when the fine prints come out.
Yes, but also, we'll have to see, because my suspicion is that, remember, this is an advance estimate, and these estimates always undergo revisions. So I think we'll need to wait for the revisions to happen. So we'll find out sometime around April or May what these revisions are going to be. I think those are going to be interesting.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. That was it from my side.